Tomorrow night, KFYO election coverage starting at 7 p.m., going all the way until midnight. And then 8 hours later, I'll be back here doing the show and talking about the ramifications of Election Day, and in studio to talk about the election and a few other statewide issues that we'll be getting into. State Representative Dustin Burrows back in studio. Good morning.
Good morning. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, how's everything going in your world?
You know, it's going fine. We're just going around the district, doing some town halls, talking to people about the issues that we're going to be tackling next session, getting some feedback on those, and continuing to do that. Did one last week. Tomorrow I'm in Snyder, and just looking forward to it.
Very cool. And we'll get into some of the legislative issues that are talked about at those town halls. But are people talking to you about the presidential election? Is that one of the big things?
Absolutely. It feels like we've been in this election cycle for 4 years now. Maybe we have, but certainly over the last several months, it's the topic everyone's talking about. They're very excited to see what actually happens tomorrow night, and what we wake up to Wednesday.
What is the feeling from voters, the feeling from the average West Texan when they're talking to you about the election? Are they looking forward to it? Are they a little bit worried about if Hillary wins, what's going to happen? Is there not anticipation, but I guess fear maybe, or that thought of going, we don't know what's going to happen next.
I don't know many people in West Texas who think that the last 8 years have been good for us. I mean, we can point to over and over problems from the last 8 years. Then they look at this candidate the Democrats have put up. Not only does she want to continue on with some really bad policies, but she has a lot of scandal that plagues her. And if she wins, I think people are apprehensive that, for another 4 years we're going to be stymied, that we're going to be in a state of bad economic policies, and just apprehensive about what she would do. And so people are worried that America might get it wrong.
What is something that if Hillary Clinton wins, and I know we're kind of getting into the legislative stuff here a little bit early, but if she wins, what is some stuff that you as a state rep and others of your colleagues, your conservative colleagues, what can Texas do to maybe buffer whatever ramifications we get from Washington? Seems like we've been talking about that for the last 8 years as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to see what her agenda is. I mean, I assume it's going to be a continuation of some of the same things, bad policy, whether it's WOTUS or other ways, attacks on religious liberties, things of that nature. We look to Abbott, our governor, if he has a plan, whether it's a Article 5 convention or elsewise, what can we do to essentially mitigate the damage that she would want to do to either our traditional values or economic growth?
Visiting with State Representative Dustin Burrows, you're looking at this election like everybody else. What are your feelings on it? What do you think happens?
So, end of the day, here's my bold prediction. I think Trump carries either Michigan or Pennsylvania or both. And I think there's you hear about this idea of a hidden vote. And I'm not so sure I've ever thought that there really was one, but if there ever was going to be a hidden vote, this is the election. I can just imagine there's a lot of people who have voted Democrat before, who've heard Trump's narrative, whether it's on trade or China or immigration, and they've said, I'm not going to answer that pollster, or I'm not going to answer that person honestly, but when I'm in there by myself, I can't vote for her, and I like what he has to say, and there may be a hidden vote, and I think Pennsylvania or Michigan or both are going to go to Trump.
We've started seeing in Nevada, which for a while Evan McMullin, who was a third-party candidate, he was bumping up in the polls. He was, real high, tied with Donald Trump, and some even ahead of Donald Trump. Now some of the polls he has sunk, Donald Trump has risen, and I attribute a lot of that to people who, we probably both know people here in Lubbock who say, not going to vote for him, not going to do it, I'm not going to vote for Donald Trump. And then they get to that polling booth and they look at the names on the ballot and go, I got to do it. I got to vote. Do you think that's a big player?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's real easy to, in July and August and September, where it's not actually a decision, to want to continue to look around for other options and be disappointed. But, as the seriousness of the situation we face comes home, and you realize there's only one of two people who's going to be the next president, and you've got to make a choice, especially if you're in a swing state and a couple votes could decide it, you make the decision, where am I going to go? In a third party, it just isn't going to work.
Yeah. What have you heard from Donald Trump relating to maybe here in the state of Texas, what Trump policies would be good for this state?
At the end of the day, he's going to deal with immigration. It's a very costly endeavor. We can talk about all the different issues surrounding it, but at the end of the day, most people that, because of our national policies that are coming over and our social welfare programs, we spend more money on them than they put back into the tax base. So again, we as, tax-paying citizens, middle income, are putting our money and redistributing it back to this population. And so I think that's been a bad thing for economic growth. He's really been interesting on some of the trade issues. The underlying cost for agriculture and other commodities has gone up and up and up because of these more progressive social welfare programs. I mean, whether it's not direct costs, it may be indirect purchase costs of what the products they are. So we become less and less competitive because the global price is the global price, but it costs more for us to grow cotton than it does elsewhere. So on trade, I think that might actually have some overall good part of the narrative for us.
If Hillary Clinton wins, it's safe to assume she's not going to do anything for the border.
Agreed.
She's just not going to do anything. How much pressure does that put on you guys down in Austin to come up with a solution on the border? Is there any kind of solution that calls for the state to come in and put a fence or a wall, whatever Donald Trump's been talking about? Is that something that Texans want?
I think that there's no doubt that he's our nominee, and so people are interested in actually, a wall. I don't know if we are going to be able to do that in the state of Texas. There's a lot of barriers to that, but we continue to put more and more assets through the DPS. We continue to do that, and I think it's had some positive effect. And I think just, talking to people down on the border where, it's starting to see what we did last session by putting $800 million new into efforts, whether it's, just having more DPS troopers and making sure that we're enforcing the laws of the land. We're doing a better job of that, and you're starting to see more commerce and activity going back towards that border area. So it's been an overall good thing.
Is that something that the state can keep up financially with? Because I know it was when it was first brought up, it was a big hit to the budget to continue to push resources down on the border. And there was a time, I think, when we talked about building Washington, D.C. in the Obama administration. I don't know if we're going to make Hillary pay for the extra security or not, if we can. But how long do you think we can keep this up?
Well, if I could find a way to make Washington pay for it, I would. I mean, one of the best reasons, if you're a Texan, to actually vote for Donald Trump is it will save us money because he'll do the job the federal government's supposed to do in the first place and save us. One of the biggest issues we face out here in West Texas is, so we may have done a better job at the border, at the state of Texas, but people are now coming through Arizona and New Mexico, and they're just going around it. So, I mean, this is a position the federal government needs to take over. Trump's going to save us money. It's going to leave us more money for education, transportation, property tax cuts, but it's definitely on people's minds. It's important, and I think that they're happy with at least Texas continuing to make the effort to do what the federal government was supposed to have done in the first place.
So the Burrows' big prediction, Michigan or Pennsylvania or both.
Correct.
Will go for Donald Trump.
That's what I think.
If that happens, I think he wins.
I see the path.
I mean, look, if he takes both Michigan and if he takes Michigan, you had Reince Priebus who was out saying, if we take Michigan, it's over. We're running the table. We're going to win every swing state. We're going to win everything. If he wins Michigan, he wins Pennsylvania, then I think that is truly that silent majority. Call them Republicans who have been burned in the past, Democrats who have been disenfranchised by the Democratic Party. That's them rising up in those states, right?
Yeah, I mean, Chad, I'm pretty conservative, so I just can't understand how anybody would vote for Hillary Clinton. I mean, I don't see the appeal there, whether it's the policies or the personal baggage she carries with her. And I just happen to believe that I think normal, average taxpaying, good Americans are going to vote for somebody other than Hillary Clinton. I just have to believe that. When
we come back, we'll continue our visit with State Representative Dustin Burrows. We'll talk about some legislative issues and some town halls. that he's been part of, and some other issues as well. We'll be right back. All right, Chad Hasty Show, News Talk, 95.1 FM, 790 AM KFYO. State Representative Dustin Burrows in studio. We're talking the election and state legislative issues. Let's head to the phones. We've got a question for the state representative. Alan, you're on with State Representative Dustin Burrows.
Thank you for taking my call, State Rep. I would have a question. It's actually two questions. The first is, over the weekend, I viewed a video that came off the Drudge Report that they got from Neil Cavuto about the President Obama saying that he encouraged illegal aliens, non-citizens, to vote and that there would be no repercussions for it. First question is, do you think that was a legitimate video or just a staged video? Second question is, if it was legitimate, isn't that treasonous? Isn't that worthy of impeachment?
Okay, so I have not seen the video, and I've actually heard someone refer to it, but I haven't had a chance to, watch it myself. So I think it'd be unfair for me to characterize what it is, but certainly you should never, ever encourage anybody to, violate election law. Illegal aliens cannot vote, period, the end. They should not be able to, and it would be very bad, to say the least, if not illegal, to try to encourage people to break the law.
Isn't that part of what Trump has been calling rigged elections?
Well, I don't know what Trump's been calling rigged elections, but you watch the mainstream media and the pandering and the questions being given ahead of time and the entire, setup where you have an entire establishment on the left coast and the east coast that essentially are surrogates for Hillary Clinton. And I think it's really hard for conservatives or Republicans to break through that noise. No matter what, I think one of the best things about the Trump candidacy thus far is it has exposed the media bias. Most of us recognize it, right? If you've been in politics and you've been out taking care of and walking blocks for candidates, you've seen media bias in the past on our East Coast and our left coast. This candidacy has exposed it in a way that I've never seen exposed before. And you just realize how difficult it is for any Republican to break through the noise when the moderators of the debate are essentially going and targeting one candidate, when they're getting questions ahead of time, when you're just watching all these things. So I really do appreciate and hope that no matter what happens, people remember what has been going on and that these people that are at the tops of some of these liberal shows, or they call themselves, nonpartisan, are in fact stumping for one party and one set of ideas.
Yeah, Alan, thanks for the call. I thought it was interesting. Also, you had, I guess it was in one of the latest WikiLeaks dumps that came out that you had CNN and some of the other news organizations actually going to the DNC asking 4 questions to ask of Donald Trump and Ted Cruz.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. Donna Brazile, actually giving the questions. It's just an amazing thing. And I think we all intuitively knew it, that there was, collusion and coordination going on, that there was, and some of us just thought, well, maybe they actually have these beliefs and they don't know that they're being willing pawns in a political agenda. But at the end of the day, you actually see from WikiLeaks, which has been a great part of this campaign. I wish they'd cover it more, but of course it maybe exposes a little bit of the connections they don't want you to see. But it's been amazing to read that there's been a, not just a tacit collusion, but an actual provable, collusion where questions are being handed over. And it's just amazing that it's been exposed during this cycle.
Let me ask you on a statewide level, when you guys are down in Austin and when you're in session, granted, I would say that Texas media, while some media outlets do lean to the left, it's not anything compared to the MSNBCs of the world or CNNs of the world. But do you experience anything like that down in Austin from some of the organizations?
Yeah, it was amazing, and I won't call out this outlet, but I remember sitting in a hearing one time, and my chairman brought in and wanted to talk about climate change, and brought in a local person to visit about it, and I was asking about some of the why she wasn't talking about nuclear energy. If you want to talk about our energy portfolio, versus some of the others, let's talk about nuclear and some of the limitations on our renewable sources not having battery storage. And very much the questions that need to be asked about some of the agenda, and brought up, some of the issues with, even if we try to do carbon emissions, how it actually hurts us. We can get into all that. But anyways, it got reported in such a way that I was essentially, against some renewables and saying all of these things. I went back and watched the video, I even showed it with my chairman. And I said, I mean, I'm not on the side of the climate change by any means, but they certainly went out of their way to, do something and say some things that you're just like, well, of course they needed the straw man to prop up and put it this way. And you see that. They want to tell a story. They've got a directive and they want to advance their particular beliefs. And if you're there, don't mind the 30 minutes of what this person actually said. Let's take the one soundbite to try to basically further our agenda, and that's just not good journalism.
Is it easy to kind of? Do you ever want to go Trump-esque on on either the statewide or the media where you do call them out?
Do I ever? Yeah, most days I do. But at the end of the day. Look, I represent a great, vibrant area, and I think part of being a representative is to make sure that, I have relationships, and, you never know. I may disagree with somebody 90% of the time, but when I find that 10% of common ground, I can work with them. I don't need to burn all those bridges, and so as a representative, I feel it's important to be down there, and as much as I want to get out and yell and expose some of this, I'm not sure in a legislative body that actually helps you advance what needs to be done for conservatism, which I believe is not just good for West Texas, but all of Texas, but also, protect and deal with some of the issues that are important to this region.
You've had some town halls lately. You're having another one tomorrow in Snyder, correct?
Correct.
What are some of the topics that have been up for discussion?
Healthcare. This is something I've been talking about for 2 years, and the cost of insurance premiums are outrageous, especially on the exchange. I saw the average cost is going to be $17,000 for a family, when this new rates get set in. It's unaffordable, and they're buying a lesser product. It has higher deductibles, higher co-pays, higher co-insurance. People can't afford it. So I'm proposing legislation to try to change behavior and fix the underlying cost issues. And so that's one of the big issues. We continue to talk about agriculture policy and what we can do at the state level to even the playing field, because there's been some changes structurally and how things are actually getting done. We talk about water. We talk about taxes, talk about schools, big issues.
Are you good to hang around one more segment?
Absolutely.
Or you got to go? Okay,
Absolutely.
Cool. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion with State Representative Dustin Burrows. Chad Hasty Show, News Talk, 95.1 FM, 790 AM KFYO. We have State Representative Dustin Burrows in studio for one more segment, taking a look ahead at probably one of the next big talking points, at least here on the show, which is the upcoming legislative session. And I think we're planning on doing at least a couple of shows down in Austin, so looking forward to that. And I think we'll even invade your office at least once.
Perfect. Look forward to it very much.
Let's see. CPS is going to be an issue that 2 years ago when they when the last session was wrapping up, if you would have said, is CPS going to be a big issue in the next legislative session, most people probably would have said no, but it looks like it's going to be.
Yeah, there's no doubt. As you get these news reports from around the state, and you have a federal judge who wrote a very lengthy opinion about some of the issues that need to be addressed. We've gone around the state and realized that they are significant issues, and we need to address them. And there's the question of, okay, so how do you do that? It's going to be a complicated issue. Some of it's going to be making sure that we have more continuity with CPS workers working on their caseload so they can actually monitor and do the job better the way they are. But, some of it's also making sure that, we deal with parents. I mean, a lot of times parents are getting in situations where they're addicted to drugs and alcohol, and we need to look for ways to get them, sober and back where they can take the children, because there's no doubt that parents being reunited with the children are the best outcomes that we can have in this system. And then making sure that there's more bed space for the higher acuity needs children. A lot of what we hear from this federal judge and a lot of the things that we learned is, I've been to 6 or 7 different cities talking about these issues and getting feedback, and a lot of the really bad results happens to a certain segment of the population of children who are in the system. And it's the children who are older, the children that have higher needs, that really need more to help take care of them. And we've got to have more space available. We have to have better reimbursables for insurance so that they can get the therapies that they need. And it just costs more for that population because they have issues. It's also making sure we identify the ones who have been abused so that we separate them from children who have not, or other children, so they don't become abusers and we don't perpetuate a cycle. So you're going to see a lot of things that we're going to do, and I think one of the things we're going to look back and say is, the system's never going to be quote unquote fixed, but we're going to do something to improve it next session.
The Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick a couple of weeks ago came out with the idea of faith-based plan to ease foster care. That's another issue that you are going to have to deal with down in Austin. What are your thoughts as far as what you've read from his plan, and what are your own thoughts just on foster care system overall in Texas?
Yeah, so historically in rural Texas, our faith-based community has played a great role in helping with that. Whether it's the Texas Boys Ranch or Buckner's, the Children's Home, all have a faith, based directive. And I support them fully. And, any ways we can support them, they're the ones who actually take the children in, provide the shelters and circumstances, help with the adoption process. They're the intermediary. And so strongly supporting them and maybe supporting them more so they have more tools that they need for these higher acuity children would be a great thing. But here's another thing about Hillary Rodham Clinton, if she becomes president, and some others on the liberal left, is some of these places don't adopt to same-sex couples. And there are groups that want to shut them down because they think that's discrimination. And one of the things that we're going to stand up against in Texas, because it's just bad policy, regardless of how you feel about the issue, I never think one of those groups shouldn't be able to, they should ever be shut down for those reasons, but some on the left want to do that. So that may be a fight that we deal with next session.
Hey, what are some other, you're going to have a tight budget to deal with. There's also school finance that you're going to have to deal with, most likely. What are the big issues other than the ones that we just mentioned that are going to be taking up a majority of your time? Again, if you look at the state legislature, why don't a whole bunch of bills pass? Well, it's designed that way. What are the big issues?
Well, this is going to be a particularly light session. Some might say that's good, that pass a budget and, let's go home. But, there's some things we have to take care of. But when we've got to start the session by plugging $1 billion shortfall, and it could have been more if we'd spent everything and set the baseline higher, which I'm glad we didn't. We've got to go find that money to basically, start where we left off last time and then tackle some of these big issues, such as CPS. So there's not going to be, the budget constraints mean we're not going to pass a lot of bills. We're going to talk about law enforcement next session. Most Texans, and myself included, want to send a strong message that Texas supports law enforcement. And there's a lot of different things that are being looked at of ways to do that. Second Amendment, we had a great session last session for Second Amendment. Campus carry, open carry. Next session, I'm going to propose legislation that does away with CHL licensing fees. I believe what the Heller decision of the Supreme Court said, that it's self-protection. And I actually think there's a good that comes from having more citizens armed with CHLs. It saves and helps us protect other people. And I think we need to reduce that as a barrier to getting a license. I don't know why we actually charge money for a license fee. So I'll propose legislation that actually does away with that. And I think that'd be a really good bill for other members and hopefully find some support for.
So Texas is not going to be like the 5 other states that have put pot anywhere near their agenda?
No.
5 states, by the way. 5 states on Election Day. This is something else to watch. California, obviously. California, Massachusetts, Maine, Arizona, and Nevada will have recreational pot use on their ballots. You think any of those pass, by the way?
I have no idea. If I was just knowing California, they'll probably vote for any bad policy that's out there.
I'm going to say Nevada passes it too. I'm going to say you got a Las Vegas. Guess what? There's going to be something else going on in Vegas.
Well, Arizona does somewhat surprise me. Of that list that you put on there, Arizona, I was kind of wondering what they're thinking. So we'll have to go take a look at that.
Yeah, State Representative Dustin Burrows, appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.